Welcome to the Chrissy Mayer podcast. We are on iTunes, YouTube, Spotify, and SoundCloud. And if you're listening right now on iTunes, please go and leave a 5-star review. You can write anything you want. It could be sexy, it could be creepy, it could be flirty, whatever it is, as long as it's 5 stars. I'm going to be reading the best 5-star reviews every week on one of the episodes. So please go ahead and leave a review. I've been climbing in a couple of countries. You know, I think when I last checked, I was the #4 comedy podcast in Jamaica. So thank you so much, Jamaica. This is very exciting for me. Also very excited to announce the show's new sponsor, Silk City Hot Sauce. Please head over to silkcityhotsauce.com. Use the promo code CMP and you'll get 15% off of your order. I just ordered some. I'm really obsessed with like the taco flavored one. I don't know if you guys are into tacos, but they've got a whole bunch. They've got mango, they've got smoked, dragon flavored, whatever you want. It's probably good enough for Hillary Clinton to keep in her purse. So head on over to silkcityhotsauce.com, enter the promo code CMP. You'll get 15% off your order, and they'll throw in a free bottle of cherry sriracha and some stickers. Promo code CMP, Silk City Hot Sauce. Very excited to have this guy on the podcast today. He is a New York Times best-selling author, writer, political strategist, consultant. Mr. Roger Stone, how are you today?
Great. It's great to be with you.
Yeah, this is great. There's so much we can talk about. I recently watched your Netflix Who is Roger Stone documentary, and there was so much I found interesting about it. And I think what I liked is that you kind of, you've been friends with Trump for like 40 years. You kind of knew early on, you knew in the 80s that he was, an interesting person and someone who you thought would be, good to run for president. What was it about him in the 80s that really drew you to him?
Well, the Netflix documentary actually entitled "Get Me, Roger Stone." The problem is Robert Mueller saw it. He thought the title was "Get Roger Stone." He spent about 2 years trying to do that. It's amazing that you can live in America and see the things that happened to me happen to any American, where in the blink of an eye, you lose your right to free speech because I was gagged, your right to travel because I was under indictment, your savings, your insurance, your ability to make a living, because I make a living writing and speaking mostly. And of course, when you're gagged, you can't do those things. And the mainstream media, the Washington Post and the CNNs and the MSNBCs are just allowed to rain shit on you 24/7, but you're not allowed to respond because that might taint the jury pool. I mean, it's Kafkaesque in its corruption and its sweep. But the movie you refer to, which, by the way, helped make me famous, but on which I made not a penny, not a single.
Oh, wow.
Was I think fairly balanced. And there were a few things that I argue that they got wrong, but you can't stare a pig in a poke. So I was not unhappy with it, but it does need a sequel. And there's several people kind of working on that today. In terms of Donald Trump, what impressed me about him was his fearlessness. This is a guy who had no investment in any of the failures of the past. So although he was a Republican, he was not a Bush Republican. He was not an establishment Republican. And he had supported some Democrats that he liked. He's very independent. He's his own man. In other words, when Trump speaks, whatever he says is coming from Trump. It's not coming from some 25-year-old speechwriter. He's not working off of talking points prepared by someone else. He's genuine, he's authentic, and he's very brave. I mean, he raised issues in this country that others have been afraid to use. He's taken some issues that are important, like immigration, which had remained, not in the mainstream, and it's become now very much a mainstream issue. So I thought that he would not only be a great candidate, because the most important thing about running for public office is being interesting. In other words, we're at the point at the pop culture where show business and politics have completely intersected, And in order to be successful, you have to be entertaining. You have to be interesting. There's nothing worse than a politician who's boring. Nixon used to say, the only thing worse in politics than being wrong is being boring. And if a candidate bores the voters because he or she has nothing interesting to say or to propose, they start looking for somebody else to vote for, somebody else to watch. So I thought that the magnetism, the charisma, the television persona, which he really honed in The Apprentice. Yeah. I mean, The Apprentice is not only made him a household word, his name was already well known, but this got him beyond business and real estate circles, so he was universally known. It also teaches him the power of the medium of television and how to use it. He's a far better performer on TV post-Apprentice, which, by the way, is the only TV series that had almost as many viewers in its last year as in its first year.
Wow.
So we had a very loyal audience, dips a little bit in the middle, but I think it aided his candidacy enormously because you think about it, it shows him in the most favorable light. In other words, he's in the high back chair, he's perfectly lit, every hair is in place, he looks decisive, he's making decisions. Now, elites snicker at that, that's reality TV, but regular people, it's television. Television's television. The news is television, entertainment's television. It's seamless. Right. Oh, I saw Trump on TV. I really liked him. Doesn't matter where they saw him. So I think that was a major factor. His independence, his courage, his physical stamina, given the diet that he's on and the fact that he gets very little sleep, it's very hard to understand how this man has this much stamina and energy, in his 70s. He outworked me on a regular basis.
What does he eat?
McDonald's.
No way.
Kentucky Fried Chicken.
Seriously?
Pizza. Now I can't disagree with him on the pizza because I'm a pizza maven myself. But no, he loves McDonald's, loves it, and I think he would eat it for every meal if he could.
Wow, good for him. He's
also a big fan of the Kentucky Fried Chicken, the big bucket, as he keeps reminding me.
I was on a road trip and I ordered a bunch of stuff and it actually came in a box that said big box of delicious. I was like, wow, I'm a little bit embarrassed to be eating this, but yeah, once in a while it is pretty good. And I like that you said politics is show business for ugly people. And I think that really speaks to your command and understanding of how most Americans view entertainment, politics. It's all the same stuff in a way. It's all what you're watching. And we've seen the Democratic Party do it. Like they're always constantly adding celebrities. Most recently, having Cardi B interview Joe Biden. And she's
well, at this point, of course, Joe Biden and Cardi B are on about the same mental level. But and given her most recent music video, which I'm sure you've seen.
Oh yeah.
We won't get into what the acronym stands for, but WAP. It's quite interesting. I wouldn't want my grandchildren to see it at this point, but they have great access in Hollywood. They have access essentially through their agents to most of the younger stars in either music or film or television. And the Republicans, you can only produce, Wayne Newton so many times before people realize that your stable of stars is not that great.
And also it's a way into, I guess, like the youth vote, millennials, right? People who aren't interested in politics, but they are interested in Cardi B. They are obsessed with celebrities, obsessed with musicians. So
this is why Kanye is so vilified. I mean, look, I really like Kanye to begin with. I like his Christianity. I like his rejection of identity politics. I like his courage of speaking his mind. I like the fact that he refuses to be taken for granted, and he thinks it's outrageous that people say, oh, just because you're black, you have to be a Democrat. You have to think a certain way. And I don't know, I think my favorite album is Jesus is King, and Salah is probably my favorite cut from that album. I mean, I was really unaware of his music until he became political. And then, I really admire him. Now, at the same token, if he wanted to run for president as an independent, he needed to begin planning that a year ago because unfortunately, half of the state deadlines for getting on the ballot have already passed. And the rules for getting on the ballot in every state are completely different. In most cases, it's extremely difficult. In other words, it's not like you just walk into the Secretary of State's office, pay a $500 fee, and you're on the ballot. It doesn't work that way. States, generally speaking, have laws regarding ballot access that were written by Republicans and Democrats working together to make sure that nobody else can get on the ballot. So you have very large signature requirements, but the signatures have to be in a certain percentage of congressional districts, and you have to have it's really difficult. New York, for example, is virtually impossible.
Wow.
Now, Ross Perot was able to do it many years ago, but he was also capable of stroking a check for, in those days, $10 million to do it. Today, it would be twice that. And you've already missed the opportunity in some major states. So the idea of the Kanye presidential candidacy, I find intriguing, mainly because I've seen no polling on it. On the one hand, you could argue that maybe he would pull votes from Joe Biden because African-American voters are traditionally Democrats. On the other hand, a lot of his issue positions are closer to Donald Trump. He's very strongly pro-life, for example. On the other hand, what I think you would find if anybody did any sophisticated survey research is that he actually would pull out new voters who otherwise weren't going to vote at all, which means it doesn't impact either Joe Biden or Donald Trump. Again, this is all theoretical because I don't think Kanye has based his campaign on any polling. I think he has based his campaign on a concept, on an idea.
So Kanye could have used a Roger Stone in his life.
Well, there are, it's interesting. The original people, I'm told, that he retained to help him with the candidacy and to get on the ballot, a company called Mercury, the people working on the account were all Democrats and Obama alum. But ultimately, when they failed in some of their early tasks, he fired them and hired new people. Now, if you believe the New York Times, this whole thing is a Republican dirty trick, allegedly dreamed up by Jared Kushner. I don't think any of that is true. They have hired some signature collection companies that have worked for Republicans in the past, but there's a limited number of those companies and not many of them are very good. So you hire the best in the market. Your goal is to get the signatures you need, not to adopt the politics of a vendor that you're hiring. So I don't think this is some kind of a ruse. I think it is, at least I believe he believes it is a very serious thing.
Yeah, and you've worked, you know a lot about the two-party system, obviously. You know a lot about Washington, and you know what it would take to have a successful third-party candidate. And I know, Joe Jorgensen has run into a little bit of trouble from some of the libertarians for, coming out and supporting Black Lives Matter. I know that was a little bit of a problem for the Libertarian Party. I know in past years, it seems overall the masses have a hard time taking the Libertarian Party seriously. We've had Vermin Supreme run like almost every year since the 90s, and he'd wear a boot on his head. And then you have, it seems the characters we know in the libertarian world are maybe a little bit harder to take seriously. How would you sort of give the Libertarian Party a makeover?
Well, as you correctly point out, in 2016, probably in 2012, I was so completely disgusted by the Republican nomination of Mitt Romney, who I believed was a total fraud, not a conservative, not a Republican, just a crony capitalist, a globalist, and just every ounce of him says phony. I mean, look at him. He's as phony as his hair color this week. I just couldn't vote for him. So I left the party of Goldwater and Reagan. I'd been Young Republican National Chairman back in the 70s. I have great affection for the party, but I left the party of my family to join the Libertarian Party. specifically to support the presidential candidacy of Governor Gary Johnson. I really like Gary Johnson. I think he is a genuine libertarian. He had governed New Mexico with libertarian principles, particularly in the economic and personal freedom areas. He created more jobs than Mitt Romney as governor and Rick Perry as governor combined. Plus, he's a great guy. He was pro-cannabis. He was across the board a sane, credible candidate for president. His running mate, Judge Jim Gray, is also a terrific guy, also quite credible, had been very active in the cannabis decriminalization and legalization area, had been a respected judge in California. That ticket in 2012 could get no media attention whatsoever. It's as if they weren't running, except they were. They got on the ballot in 48 states, which is an extraordinary accomplishment for the party. They had the right to be on in all states. The truth is they got screwed in Michigan and Oklahoma, as I recall, where they turned in more than enough signatures, but through partisan chicanery, they were blocked from the ballot. And I think Johnson worked very hard, but it was very hard to get anybody in the media to pay any attention. Fast forward to 2016. By the way, in 2012, I wanted Bill Weld to be Gary Johnson's running mate, and I approached him, and he said, and I quote, "Are you out of your mind?" He had no interest whatsoever. 4 years later, out of the blue, Bill Weld, who's a very, very smart guy, approached Johnson about running for vice president. That's because Hillary sent him. That was his job. And he basically used that forum, that pulpit of being the vice presidential candidate, to trash Donald Trump and to laud Hillary Clinton. Unfortunately, the promised ambassadorship did not come through when Hillary lost. By the way, Bill Weld's a friend of mine, but I could see exactly what he was doing. It's interesting to me, though, in 2016, the Johnson-Weld ticket gets all kinds of media coverage. CNN does a town hall for them. They get a much higher profile. Why? Well, because the corporately owned media decided incorrectly that they were taking votes from Donald Trump. That's not necessarily true. They were taking some votes from Donald Trump. They were taking some votes from Hillary Clinton. They were attracting people who otherwise wouldn't have voted for anyone. But it's extraordinary how the media treats their candidacy entirely differently. There's two problems. One is the problem of ballot access. The Libertarian Party has surmounted that problem. They've done a great job of getting their candidates on the ballot. It would be nice if they nominated somebody that anyone had ever heard of. I have a hard time remembering the name of the candidate they nominated. I'm sure she's a very nice lady. She can't raise $5. Money does buy advertising. Advertising does reach voters. Voters are educated through advertising. That's one of the problems. And starting as someone that no one has ever heard of, it puts you really, at a disadvantage. At least if you're a senator or a governor or a movie star or an athlete, you start with some level of people knowing who you are. Trump's great advantage coming into the 2016 race was he didn't have to stop to tell them who he was. They already knew who he was. He could move right to the policy part of the campaign. Marco Rubio, for example, had another hurdle. He had to first explain to you who he was and what he was doing there. Because nobody outside of Florida had heard of him to speak of. But then there's the biggest problem of all, which is not a problem of the party. It is the problem of the debates. In order to score in the electoral contest, you have to be in the debates. The Presidential Commission on Debates is not appointed by the president, is not a commission, and it's certainly not about debate. It's about limiting debate. It's the Republicans and Democrats working together to create artificial rules that ensure that the Libertarian Party candidate and the Green Party candidate can't get in the debates. So they set a ridiculous threshold. You must score 15% in 5 consecutive polls that we choose. And when Gary Johnson actually achieves that, they have a big meeting of the commission and they change the number to 20% to make sure he can't be in the debate. A poll taken 2 weeks before the first presidential debate in 2012 showed that 79% of the voters said they wish there was another candidate.
Oh, wow.
They had no idea that there were two. Jill Stein, who worked very hard to get on the ballot, and Gary Johnson. So I would suggest to you that the criteria for being in the national debate should be whether or not the candidate has gotten on the ballot for a sufficient number of states to theoretically win the 270 electoral votes necessary for victory. If they have, that's not easy. That is a Herculean task. If they have achieved that, that means they're a credible candidate. They should be in the debates. If there are upcoming debates between Biden and Trump, and I absolutely believe that there should be, that there must be, yes, I believe the Libertarian Party candidate and the Green Party candidate should be included because they're on the ballot in enough states to theoretically win. But they won't be. You can almost guarantee that.
Yeah, what are your feelings about the upcoming election, you know, and the debates? The last I heard is that one was going to be over Zoom, and does it feel like to you that they're just trying Democrats are doing everything they can to keep the two of them from being in person live?
Yeah, well, I mean, you wrap this up on the other end, which is, here's the libertarian dilemma.
Mm-hmm.
You can't get in the debates, so therefore you're not well known. You can't become well known because you can't get in the debates. Right. It's the chicken and egg problem. As far as what's happening now, the Democrats have great fear that Joe Biden will make a fool of himself in the debates or make egregious mistakes, and therefore they will come up with every excuse they can to avoid a debate. Oh, the debates don't prove anything. Oh, the debates are not important. Oh, the debates are just, sound bites. They have a real deep-seated fear about Biden's ability to react in the moment. Now, if you go back and look at the debate between Biden and Bernie Sanders, where I frankly think Sanders had the better arguments, the stronger arguments, particularly given the socialist direction of the Democratic Party and the targeted audience, Biden, I think, dispatched Bernie pretty easily in that debate. He was actually quite good. I mean, good for Joe Biden. So this idea that Biden will, come on stage and drop his pants, not necessarily. Joe could have a good night. Joe could have a bad night. You just don't know. But I would also say, continuing to say that he is mentally deficient, that he is unstable, that he has dementia, that he's not all there, serves to lower the expectation level for him in a debate. And therefore, if he does anything other than drop his pants, it will be hailed as a victory. So there's some danger in that for the Republicans. Also, the president is letting the expectation level for him get out of sight. So if he does a good job, but people said he didn't do a great job, the mainstream media, the corporate-owned media, will try to chalk it up as a loss. I can tell you this about the last debates, and that is Hillary Clinton never said anything in those debates that hadn't been polled, focus grouped, round-tabled, tested, and so on. There's nothing real about her at all. She's completely artificial. And I can tell you how much time Trump spent preparing for the debates.
Seriously? He spent no time preparing?
Zero. And I think he won. I think he won at least 3 of them. You could argue that 2 of them he won and the third one was a draw. I would argue he bested her in all 3, because it's not about statistics and memorizing huge banks of memory. It's about being entertaining, being interesting, big picture concepts. People are taking the measure of you as a person. And Trump's lightning response when Hillary Clinton said, "We can't have a man like Donald Trump running the Justice Department." And Trump turns to her and said, "Yeah, because you'd be in jail." It was over at that moment. That was the defining moment of the 2016 campaign.
Yeah, it was like watching a comedy roast battle. I was like, oh, he's got her. Like I've heard that soundbite more than just about any other one from that debate. So,
well, I mean, he's an instinctual player. I mean, he is a guy who operates on his wits. He's very good at it, and therefore he had a high level of confidence. He knew what he wanted to say, and he said it. Cramming with these, giant 6-ring binders of information, that's just not Donald Trump, and it's not what it calls for.
Yeah, and you're never gonna, if you're always focused on what you've memorized, you're never gonna be truly in the moment. And I think that's a real skill, just being able to improvise and be yourself and come across genuine, because the people watching pick up on all that.
Well, when I watched Trump in those debates, I thought of that famous Muhammad Ali saying where he said, "Float like a butterfly, sting like a bee." I thought he was so much better than she was. She looked rehearsed, and she looked frozen. She looked scared, and she had a lot to be afraid of, obviously.
Yeah. I want to talk to you about some of the more recent, I guess, kind of drama surrounding you. I'm sure a lot of people are very interested to hear your thoughts on the recent withdrawing of your appeal.
Yeah, this was something that I do very reluctantly. In other words, I don't think I was given a fair trial. I think that the fact that the jury forewoman was attacking me by name in 2019, that she had those social media postings on a private setting during jury selection and the trial, and then deleted them after the trial. But the judge ruled that we had an obligation to know about them in advance when there was no way to know about them, or also that they didn't constitute bias is ridiculous.
Crazy.
And therefore, I really felt that I deserved a new trial. The judge made a number of constitutional errors in the trial. I was not, for example, allowed to raise the misconduct of Mueller's dirty cops, the FBI, the Department of Justice, or any member of Congress in my defense. That's unconstitutional. The integrity of the investigation, indictment, and prosecution of any defendant is a legitimate grounds of defense, according to the Supreme Court. This was just a stacked deck, start to finish. The makeup of the jury was better known as the Clinton-Obama administration alumni reunion. So, there was no way I was getting out of there with a fair trial. And then on top of it, totally contrary to all the current rules, regulations, and legal precedents, they wanted to incarcerate me immediately in a facility that was rife with active COVID-19 cases. So the same prison they wanted to send me to on July 14th, the week before, released a pedophile, a child pornographer, a serial rapist, a bank robber, and a guy who knocked over 2 liquor stores with a shotgun to protect them from COVID-19, but they wanted to put me in that facility. So to me, it was a death penalty. It really was sending me to a certain death. I'm 67. I know I don't look it.
You don't look it.
And I've had asthma my whole life. I gave the court extensive medical records. We pointed out the legal precedent in every circuit in the country where someone who's about to be incarcerated was moved to home confinement. The DC Circuit Court didn't care. The DC Circuit Court didn't care about the gag order on me during my trial, which was unconstitutional. The DC Circuit vacated their order to the judge in General Flynn's case to dismiss his case based on egregious prosecutorial misconduct. They withheld exculpatory evidence from him, and we found evidence of their own notes that he was politically targeted, and they knew he committed no crime. But the DC Circuit still won't cut him loose. The DC Circuit ordered that Donald Trump's lawyer, Don McGahn, must testify to Congress about his conversations with his client. Wrong. The DC court last week tells us, no, Hillary Clinton can't be questioned about her email. Why would I want to put my fate into the hands of what is a completely politicized court? They have no regard for the law or the Constitution. They have a liberal political agenda. Then, even if I won a new trial, which I really believe I'm entitled to, as do lawyers like Jonathan Turley, and who's not a conservative, and Alan Dershowitz, Judge Andrew Napolitano, believe it's clear cut. The Supreme Court says you're entitled to a impartial and indifferent jury. There was nothing indifferent about this woman, this forewoman. She hated my guts. Then I would be back in front of the same judge. And this judge had a series of rulings that were unconstitutional in my case, silencing me and limiting the topics of my defense. And then lastly, when I was found guilty, which was not really a surprise, in a 55-minute tirade, she said that there was nothing phony about the Mueller investigation. That's wrong. Stone, you were convicted of covering up for the president. That wasn't one of the charges. It is not what I'm convicted of. She also criticized my belligerence. Let me translate that for you. You refused to plead guilty when we told you to. You wouldn't cooperate and make up false lies about the president. They wanted me, they pressured me substantially beginning on March 14th, 2019. They presented me with a list of telephone calls between myself and candidate Trump in 2016. And they said, if you will just tell the truth and admit these were all about coordinating with the Russians on the WikiLeaks disclosures, we will argue for leniency in your sentencing with the judge. In other words, they wanted me to lie. Now that gets twisted to Stone knew of misconduct by the president and he traded his silence for clemency. Wow. Bullshit. There's no evidence of that whatsoever. I think Congressman Jerry Nadler was the first guy to come up with that. It's false, but that doesn't stop Hillary Clinton from repeating it. Adam Schiff, Eric Swalwell. I mean, it's the usual suspects. These people have no regard for the truth of the facts. They just keep recycling the same garbage again. So to raise $1 million and to put myself in jeopardy again before the same judge in the same corrupted system, it just didn't make any sense in the end. I really believe in a fair trial, I could win exoneration. The charges against me are ridiculous. Lying to Congress. To lie to Congress, the lie has to be material, meaningful, relevant, significant. The things I'm accused of making misstatements about were insignificant and they hid no underlying crimes. But I'm not prepared to put myself at risk. I mean, I came this close to going to a COVID-19 infested prison where right now I'd probably be eating a dried up bologna sandwich.
Wow. Yeah. Meanwhile, they released a whole bunch of other, prisoners at other, jails because to avoid them catching COVID.
Michael Avenatti was sprung. Michael Cohen was sprung to home confinement. Rick Gates, who testified falsely against me at my trial, was sprung to home confinement. So I guess this is more of the special treatment the Democrats keep saying that I got. So in other words, Clapper, Mueller, Comey, Brennan, Hillary, or Rosenstein, they all lied to Congress about material things. None of them have been charged. I was more of that special treatment. Or there was that great morning when 29 heavily armed FBI agents stormed my home at 6 o'clock in the morning, arriving by land, sea, and air to take me in custody for the nonviolent white-collar process crime of lying to Congress. That's definitely special treatment, any way you slice it. And CNN, as you know, just coincidentally happened to show up 14 minutes before the FBI.
Wow.
Amazing.
Like, at least let you have your coffee first,
No, actually, it's kind of interesting because I had a pretty good idea they were coming.
Wow.
Because of something one of the CNN reporters had said to me. But my cell phone, so I got up at 5 a.m., took a shower, put on my iconic Roger Stone Did Nothing Wrong t-shirt, which you can get yours at fightback.store if you want one.
Oh, good.
We'll send you one for free.
Oh, yay.
Although they now say Roger Stone still did nothing wrong. In any event, so I kind of expected them that they were coming. And then I got a call on my cell phone, was a police officer in the local police. And he said, what are you doing right now? I said, I'm at home. Why? He said, well, I'm at the Starbucks here. And I think there's 29 FBI agents getting coffee. And then they're headed to your house. And I said, I've been expecting them. And they did arrive in 17 armored vehicles. I could hear the helicopter overhead. I know later from the security camera footage that 2 amphibious units pulled up to the dock behind my house because I lived on a canal with these frogmen, all of them wearing night goggles, all of them in full SWAT gear, all of them carrying assault weapons. They pound on the door. I open the door looking down the barrel of 2 guns. They say that this was absolutely necessary to arrest me in this manner because I was considered a flight risk. They know I did not have a valid passport. They know that I don't own a firearm, even though I support the Second Amendment. And I'm kind of well known. I mean, people recognize me. Where was I going to go? Plus, it was not a secret that I was under investigation. They had leaked that I was going to be charged with treason, conspiracy against the United States, espionage, illegal receipt and dissemination of stolen data, and a host of other crimes they could never find any evidence of. So again, another example of the special treatment that I received. My wife still has nightmares about it. My dogs were terrified. It was completely unnecessary. All they had to do was call my lawyer, and I would have been happy to turn myself in. Just a perfect example of the Gestapo tactics of Andrew Weissman, the de facto head of the Mueller investigation.
Wow. And I was watching recently Millie Weaver's Shadowgate documentary. I don't know if you had a chance to check that out.
I've got some real problems with that because according to the documentary, I own equity with General James Jones, Paul Manafort, Rick Davis, and I think John McCain in a company that I'd never heard of. I have never had any interaction with General Jones whatsoever. I don't know him. I've never done business with him. I don't own any equity in some technological surveillance company. All of that is just categorically false. When this fellow Patrick Berge showed up at some of my public events, he asked me and I told him it was not true. It's still not true. I haven't had a chance to see the rest of the documentary. I like Millie Weaver. I've always liked her. But if you believe that I'm a deep state operative, how do you explain what they just put me through over the last 2 years?
Right. And the one point I did like about the documentary is that she actually proved that it was the jury that they used for you. They basically picked people that they knew by checking at their social media. They picked people that they knew were going to say, guilty no matter what. It wasn't.
That is absolutely true. The reason you could tell that is because in the original pool of 120 prospective jurors, there was 1 Republican. Even in the District of Columbia, that's mathematically impossible. And then when you got to the actual jury, there were no Republicans. There were also no independents. Everybody was a Democrat. Several of them had worked as political appointees in the Obama or Clinton administrations. There were people with direct ties to the FBI, people with direct ties to one of the prosecutors in my case. Somebody worked on the presidential campaign of Beto O'Rourke. One guy who worked in a liberal think tank. I mean, there were no military veterans. There were no Republicans. There were no evangelical Christians. There were no Roman Catholics. There were no Black men, no African-American men who are traditionally very distrustful of government. Given the war on drugs, you see why. So no, it was a rigged jury from the get-go.
Yeah, it seems pretty rare that all of that would be going on with the jury. Yeah, and I wanted to ask you, the stress, and you were explaining how your wife still has nightmares about the time, they just came to your house with guns and really unnecessary kind of extra scary tactics. And I can't imagine how stressful all of this has been on you and your family. How has this affected, you, your wife, your health? How do you guys deal with it?
Well, in all honesty, this was a very real problem. My life was in turmoil because I'm a fighter, but I wasn't being allowed to fight. This trial was like going into a trial. The judge had so prohibited every powerful defense. I couldn't argue selective prosecution. All these big Democrats lied. They're not held responsible. I couldn't argue the misconduct of the Mueller investigation. I'm not even here today. I'm still prohibited from telling you some of the things they did that are every bit as egregious as what they did in Flynn's case or the FBI. There's no question in my mind that the Mueller investigators defrauded several federal judges, told them they had evidence of all these huge crimes, money laundering, millions, wire fraud, mail fraud, conspiracy, treason, espionage. They get the warrants. They go through all of my emails, text messages, phone calls. They don't find what they're looking for. There is no brief of documents given to me by WikiLeaks. Doesn't exist. No evidence that I knew the source or the content or ever possessed the WikiLeaks documents prior to their publication. So then they take my emails and they go to Adam Schiff, who's on the Intelligence Committee. That's a violation of the law. Adam Schiff crafts a number of gotcha questions, all of which are immaterial, but all of which are tricky. Isn't it coincidental that every question I was accused in the indictment of lying about was asked by one congressman? How coincidental. Then Schiff illegally takes the classified transcript of my testimony and gives it to Mueller without a formal vote of the committee. And at that point, Weissman crafts an indictment around this setup. Now, Schiff broke the law and the House rules. The prosecutors broke the law in sharing that information, but I'm not allowed to raise any of that in my trial. It is a classic setup. Adam Schiff, I've got to give the guy credit. He is the biggest con man, the biggest charlatan, the biggest huckster, the biggest fraud to ever hit the U.S. Congress. And boy, that's saying a lot.
Yeah. So, you know, how do you?
Well,
right. Yeah, you can't really talk about it. Yeah.
To go to your question, you know, particularly I kind of hit rock bottom in January, where I was angry, frustrated, worried about who would support my wife in the event that I was unjustly incarcerated. My wife is very hard of hearing. She has rheumatoid arthritis. She's a beautiful, vibrant woman. She gets around pretty good, but she's going through a tough time. I'm not sure, having lost my home, my savings, and every asset I owned, how she would survive if I had to go to prison unjustly. And I had the opportunity to meet Franklin Graham, a number of pastors and others, both in my own Catholic church and evangelicals, both black and white, had urged me to take refuge in the Lord. They had told me repeatedly, "You're a nervous wreck. You got to find some solace in God." And although I was raised as a Roman Catholic and had all my sacraments in that church, I wasn't a very good Christian. I wasn't walking in his way, as they say. I had refused this advice previously. And then I finally had a chance to meet Franklin Graham, and he was very persuasive. He just said, "Look, you can get this off your shoulders. I'm telling you, if you will confess your sins, if you'll reaffirm your faith in Christ, which you've done early in your life, God will protect you. He will not abandon you. You will see everything will turn out into your favor. But you have to do this, and you have to be sincere about it." And I thought about it, and then I did it. With 500 other Christians, I stood in a field in Boca Raton, Florida. I confessed my sins. I reaffirmed my allegiance to Christ. I promised to try to be a better Christian, a better person. And that was on a Saturday. Monday morning, the story broke about the jury misconduct, which my lawyers and I knew nothing whatsoever about. Cause, effect. So, look, I know there are people watching this who are going to say, "Okay, right, you know, Stone's he's a play actor, he's a con man, this is a ploy, this is a head fake, he's just posturing." I don't really care. Prayer works. I'm living proof of it. I was sentenced essentially to death in a completely corrupted and broken system, contrary to the law, contrary to the rules, and through the grace of God, the president saved my life. I'm disappointed that I won't get an opportunity to prove my innocence and clear my name, but going back into this rigged system would have the same result. If you gave me a different judge in a different venue, it'd be different, but they won't. And therefore, I'm just not willing to put my family or myself in that jeopardy.
And now with the new Senate intelligence report, that just sort of, I guess, like adds more.
This is unbelievable. When any government agency, particularly the intelligence agencies, tell you that they have assessed something. Always look for that word, assessed. That means they have a theory which they have no proof for whatsoever. That means they're bullshitting you. We assessed that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. It's nonsense. They assessed that I spoke on the telephone with Donald Trump regarding WikiLeaks based on the testimony of Michael Cohen. What they don't tell you is Cohen said it was in early July, then he said it was in late August. Cohen said that a woman's secretary came into the room and said, Mr. Trump, Roger Stone is on line one. But that woman's secretary, when we found her, she has no memory of that happening whatsoever. So we have an uncorroborated story from a guy who's changed his story. That's their proof. That just never happened. If it had happened, they would have charged me with it. I denied in my House testimony that I spoke to Donald Trump about WikiLeaks. That's the truth. He denied it in his written interrogatories, despite the fact that Eric Swalwell is out recycling the same lie. There's no evidence to prove it, but the Senate Intelligence Committee assessed it. Here's my other favorite one. On July 17th, Roger Stone wrote a tweet for Trump in which Trump proposed a new peace deal with Vladimir Putin. I didn't write any tweets for Donald Trump in 2016 or 2015 for that matter. According to who? Where's the proof of this crazy claim? So actually, the Senate Intelligence Committee report mentions me 1,098 times, if you count the footnotes. They should have called this the Stone Report.
Yeah.
The Republicans on the House Intelligence Committee were as compromised and as establishment as the Democrats. This report isn't worth the paper it's printed on. There is no Russian collusion. And if there was Russian interference in our election, it was completely ineffective. I'm sorry, but $100,000 of badly written Facebook ads written by somebody for whom English is clearly a second language did not move any voters to anyone. And all of those ads weren't even anti-Hillary and pro-Trump. They were all over the place. Some were pro-Sanders, some were pro-Hillary. It's an absurd notion. So this Senate report is worthless. Now, I've only read half of it. I'm going to finish the other half today, and then I will write a rebuttal piece, because now that I'm not gagged, I just refuse to be smeared.
So, wow, when did the gag stop?
The gag was left on me after I was found guilty. This is unheard of in American jurisprudence. Wow. Unheard of. It was only lifted when the judge, after many weeks of trying to figure out how she was going to get away with it, denied me a new trial based on the juror's misconduct. The juror should have been prosecuted herself. What she did was illegal. I also argue, even though I can't talk about the content, that she lied in her other assertions to the court. She certainly misled the court under oath during voir dire when she said she couldn't recollect what crime I had been charged with. Yet she posted a story about my indictment to Twitter. Wow. And when we pointed this out in the hearing, the judge said, and I quote, "Just because she posted a link to a story doesn't mean she read the story."
Oh, God.
Okay, right.
Wow, that's wild. I mean, to me it seems like, and I don't know, I'm just a comedian. Like, I feel like I know relatively nothing, but from what I do know, it just seems like WikiLeaks was so damaging that they're just trying to blame anybody they can and pull down the most influential people.
No, this whole thing has been extraordinarily stressful. I mean, sometimes I feel like a man trapped on an elevator with Eric Swalwell after he's eaten 3 chili dogs. I mean, it's not, it has not been a great experience.
Yeah, it's been a lot. And then, I mean, I want to know what your feelings on Pizzagate are, because I feel like this has been sort of.
I have no idea. I mean, I have never commented on Pizzagate. So when you see these memes saying Alex Jones and Roger Stone push this false, I have no idea. Never spoke about it, never looked at it, never studied. Now, is pedophilia a legitimate problem? Yes, worldwide. pedophilia exists in the upper classes of our society around the world, and it is a problem. And child sex trafficking is a problem, and it is real. Who is and is not involved, I don't know. It is interesting that if you go to my 2016 book, The Clintons' War on Women, which I'm convinced is the real reason that I was charged, there's a very long chapter on Epstein. And everything that you have learned in the last 18 months about Jeffrey Epstein was in my book. I had the flight logs. I knew that Bill Clinton had been on Epstein's plane 28 times. I knew that Bill had been to the island 17 times. I had the report of Virginia Roberts, now Virginia Giuffre, who said she saw Bill partying on the island with two 17-year-olds. That's all in my book, including the documentation. But because the mainstream media chose to ignore my book, it got no coverage. The only reporter in America who wrote about this earlier than me, not that I'm a media reporter, but I am an author, was a guy named Nick Bryant, who wrote some extraordinarily strong stories for Gawker. He was really the first American reporter to figure this all out. There are two Nick Bryants. The other one is also an author who wrote a book on John F. Kennedy's failure to do anything about civil rights called Bystander. Also a great book, but the two are often confused. So this has been out there for a long time, but when your friends are George Stephanopoulos and Katie Couric, don't, as Jeffrey Epstein's friends were, because they went to a party for him when he got out of jail in Florida, you can't count on the corporate media to expose this stuff. It just never happened. It is only now that we are learning things that really were hiding in plain sight back in 2015 and 2016.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to ignore a huge painting of Bill Clinton in Epstein's New York apartment. You know, he's wearing like this blue dress, these red heels. It's hard to.
Well, and the police chief of Palm Beach, not the county, but the city, ran a 6 months undercover investigation of Epstein, and he gave the state's attorney an airtight case for child sex trafficking, child rape, exploitation of minors, crimes that should have put Epstein away for life. And the prosecutor came back and charged Epstein with 1 count of solicitation, a slap on the wrist. And for that, Epstein was sentenced to 15 months in jail, but instead of going to a Florida state penitentiary, which are notoriously harsh, he was allowed to serve his sentence in the new air-conditioned wing of the Palm Beach County Jail, where he only had to be there from 10 at night, from 10 at night to 6 in the morning. Otherwise, he was allowed to go anywhere he wanted. He actually used a security detail from the sheriff's department as his personal entourage. And you have to ask how that happened. When the police chief, who was unhappy about this, went to the federal prosecutors for the Southern District, the U.S. attorney, Acosta, basically ran his own investigation. Then he rubber stamped the state's decision and he sealed it. So none of us would ever know any of this, except for the Palm Beach Post newspaper went to court in a prolonged battle to get those documents unsealed. When Acosta, who was later appointed by Trump to his cabinet, although nobody bothers to tell the president, oh, by the way, this guy is the prosecutor who basically took a pass on Jeffrey Epstein. When he's asked about it before his confirmation hearings, he says, I'm not worried about Epstein. He works for American intelligence.
Wow.
So, I mean, we're just not being told this entire story. I don't know that we ever will be. I believe, just based on the research I did for the book, I read every word of all of these depositions. I read the trial transcripts from the Florida trial or from the Florida indictment. I believe that he worked for many intelligence agencies. I think he probably did do work for the United States, but I think he also worked for the Saudis, the Israelis. I think he worked for a number. He was basically, a gun for hire, and blackmail was his specialty.
Right. It seems like he would you know, get people to the island. I feel like a lot of this stuff also went on in his New York City apartment. I mean, all his properties were full of cameras, right? So it feels like he would sort of lure people on, or friends of his who already were kind of pedophiles, or if somebody was like, could go either way. It almost seems like he'd sort of bait them and be like, oh, here's a 15-year-old girl. And he just so happens to have, you know, video of it. And now he's got everybody in his pocket.
You know, well, he doesn't anymore because he's dead. How coincidental, by the way, that the cameras went down just at the time that he was that he took his own life.
All the cameras went down. Both the guards were sleeping. It seems hard to believe all of that is a coincidence.
Yeah, I don't believe that he killed himself. I do think that Ghislaine Maxwell was essentially his pimp. She was running the procurement operation. They would have women at the bus stations and the train stations in southern Florida looking for runaways that they could basically clean up and bring in for his amusement. He was clearly trafficking underage children out of state to others. This guy was intrinsically evil. How he got away with it for as long as he did is an extraordinary question. The left's attempt to tie him more to Donald Trump than to Clinton is laughable.
It's crazy.
Trump never went to his island. Trump never went to his home. Trump never went to his apartment in New York, not once. Trump went to his home once in Palm Beach. I cover it in my book. Trump pulled up with his chauffeur, sees all these young women in the pool and says, boy, Jeff's a great guy letting the neighborhood kids use his pool.
Wow.
He goes into the house, he's uncomfortable, and he leaves. He was there 15 minutes. He bans Epstein from his club, Mar-a-Lago, after Epstein comes on to the underage daughter of one of the members and also comes on to a woman who works in the spa facility. Mm-hmm. So, no, sorry, but they knew each other from New York social connections, but unlike Bill and Hillary, Donald Trump never partied with Jeffrey Epstein.
Yeah, that's what I really didn't like. I mean, there was a Netflix documentary about Epstein, and they must have showed that one picture of him and Trump like 3 or 4 times. So I really didn't like that they're trying to, you know, connect the two. And yeah, meanwhile, everyone ignores or denies that Clinton was there 26 something times.
Yeah, that's really chutzpah. Has put out a statement saying I was never on the island. Please.
And then speaks at the convention. I don't know. It's crazy to me how everybody on the left is ignoring the Bill Clinton thing. I mean, that's.
Well, it's like I find the charges of Tara Reade against Joe Biden entirely credible.
Yeah.
It's certainly more credible than the charges made against Brett Kavanaugh. Mm-hmm. But the feminists are not really feminists. They're really Democrats. They're really liberals. So it was never really about assaulting a woman. There's a second woman who I believe came forward regarding Biden. But this is just, you know, ignored, swept under the rug. It's not relevant. Meanwhile, you know, Bill Clinton's, you should read my book, The Clintons' War on Women. Still available. You can get it at the stonecoldtruth.com site in the store if you want a signed copy, or you can get it from Amazon or Barnes and Noble if you want me to make not a penny on it. You can get it there as well. But it's you'll see why the Clintons are so terribly fond of me. The prosecutors in my case, both of the 2 prosecutors had just previously worked for Hillary Clinton. How coincidental.
How convenient.
Yet the judge saw no conflict in that.
That's ridiculous.
In fact, in my sentencing diatribe, the judge says, this case was really about Roger Stone's search for Hillary Clinton's missing emails. Well, then how could you have Hillary Clinton's lawyer in that case as the chief prosecutor of my case? The judge saw no conflict of interest there. Unbelievable.
That's crazy. Do you think the most damaging emails that came to the surface with WikiLeaks were the sort of Podesta, you know, Pizzagate stuff? Do you think that was the most damaging?
Well, because I had tweeted that Podesta's time in the barrel will come. I actually said the Podestas, that's a plural, meaning the 2 brothers. I was referring to their extensive business dealings in Eastern Europe, particularly in Russia, which had come out of the Panama Papers, and also some great investigative reporting done just a couple of weeks before I tweeted that at Breitbart. But the left immediately assumed that Stone was foreshadowing the fact that WikiLeaks had obtained Podesta's emails and was going to publish them. I didn't know that. I didn't know it until they published them. There's no evidence was found when they got their search warrants, but it's an article of faith among crazy leftists that I knew in advance about that. It's just not true. I explained my tweet, but you know, after I've explained it for the 100th time, Chris Cuomo still wanted to bring it up in an interview. That's the thing about how the media has changed. A false charge is made, you rebut it with documented evidence, they go away for about 10 minutes, then they're back the next week with the same phony charge. We're right back at it. The day after my commutation, Robert Mueller writes, or somebody writes for him in the Washington Post, Roger Stone was communicating with Russian intelligence officers with an S, known to us. He's referring to my Twitter direct messages with the persona of Guccifer 2, which I publicly released entirely in 2017, the content of which is benign. There's no evidence of a crime or trading any information or anything of value. And the whole thing takes place in late October after WikiLeaks had already published everything. And you can't even prove that Guccifer 2.0 is a Russian asset. Just because you say you've assessed it doesn't make it a fact. In fact, there's more evidence that persona was a cutout for the CIA. So again, they keep recycling the same thing. And then the best part is Rod Rosenstein takes that quote from the Washington Post and says on his Twitter, Robert Mueller said Roger Stone was communicating with a Russian intelligence, with a known Russian intelligence officer. So instead of a Russian intelligence officer known to us, he changes it to known. How clever to make it sound like it was a willful Stone reached out to a Russian spy. These people are vermin. Trump's right. They're scum. If anybody on the right or a libertarian tried that, the Washington Post would be down your throat. But they play these tricky word games and nobody even blinks.
Yeah, and despite you providing evidence to the contrary, it seems like, well, if we can just keep bringing this up and keep this in the public's mind, and maybe if we just keep mentioning it, people will actually believe it. And it seems like that's...
Well, I released all those text messages or all those direct messages back in 2017, all of them. They act like it's a secret, like I was hiding them, that there was something untoward there. It's all fabrication. You see it every day, and you have this marriage of convenience between the corporately owned media and the power establishment or deep state or military industrial complex. Call them whatever you want. There are a set of people in this country, in the military, in the intelligence agencies, in the government, in the national security structure, in the think tanks, in the defense contractors. Presidents come and go, but they don't change. They're still there. Therefore, the people testifying against the president in the Ukrainian scandal all work for the Trump administration. They're all in the Trump national security apparatus, leading you to the obvious question. Why weren't these people fired? The president's prerogative is to bring in people he trusts. But when they took out Mike Flynn, who, by the way, I think is a great, great American and a true war hero and a very honest guy, when they decapitated him, it allowed them to keep control of the national security apparatus. Because let's face it, endless war that costs us billions and lots of lives, that's a big moneymaker for some people. Yeah. Just bad for the American people.
What are your thoughts on the whole QAnon phenomena?
Well, I don't know if it's real, but I hope it is. I mean, I think some of the information they provide is very interesting. Some of it I know to be true. Parts of it I have some skepticism about, but I hope most of what they say is true. It's a surprisingly large movement. I mean, as I go around the country raising money for my legal defense fund or for book signings, I meet many, many, many followers of Q. They're patriotic Americans. They love the president. They're worried about their country. Some others have suggested that since there's this reoccurring theme of this is all coming, just wait, it's coming, some people are concerned that freezes some patriots or stalls their activism. I'm not sure that's true, but it is interesting to me that they're not banned on any of the social media platforms where I am banned. That's a little odd.
It is interesting to see, like, over the years, the amount of increase on social media censorship and banning. Like, it started out with, Alex Jones, people such as yourself, like, journalists getting banned. Well, now it's like we see a lot of comedians, anybody who follows Q. I'm seeing, Twitter came out and banned thousands of QAnon people, about a month or so, just because Chrissy Teigen felt threatened,
Yeah, no, it's reached the point of absurdity. On the day the president commuted my sentence, Facebook announced that based on a report that they had commissioned by some research operation in New York, funded by Soros, that because I owned 100 fake Facebook profiles, and because I was disseminating falsehoods or unauthorized information, whatever the hell that is, that I was banned for life. Well, first of all, I don't and have never owned 100 fake Facebook pages.
Who has the time?
I don't think I've even owned one, to be honest with you. I have Stone Cold Truth. I had Stone Zone, my old blog. I had my personal page. I had a page for each one of the 5 books that I've written. That's pretty much it. Did I set up Facebook pages for legitimate political committees and candidates? Yeah, absolutely. But who's to say what's fake and what's real? They get to decide. So, for example, if you say the Russians didn't hack the DNC, because they didn't, there is no online hack. There's no forensic evidence or proof of that. They've assessed that. But there is a lot of evidence to the contrary. I wanted to present expert testimony and forensic evidence off the internet to prove that that never happened. But the judge barred me from doing that. The point, of course, is I have a really good friend who's had the same Facebook page for 10 years. He posts pictures of his children's softball. He picks pictures of his family. He talks about his church. He posts one thing, advocating freedom for Roger Stone. Boom, he's deplatformed. I mean, this has happened to a number of my friends. Is the suggestion that I'm telling him to post that? I didn't, but so what? The idea that his whole page is unauthentic because he posted one thing favoring, freedom for Roger Stone, that's outrageous.
It's unbelievable.
The only thing more outrageous than that is the fact that the Justice Department under Donald Trump still has done nothing about this, because it is a obvious violation of antitrust law. And you go to a judge and get an order to shut Facebook down tomorrow if you had the will. What they're doing is wrong. As you know, the lawsuits on First Amendment grounds have not been terribly successful. But there are other issues here. There are other business-related issues. There's the question of contracted services. I paid for advertising on Facebook. I paid for advertising on Twitter. They violated those contracts. There's a contract law argument. But the antitrust and the monopolistic practices of these companies leaves them very vulnerable to a Justice Department that was a bit more aggressive.
Yeah, and it's been proven, like Project Veritas did a whole piece where they uncovered that the Facebook content moderators were on purpose deleting anything that was pro-Trump, just targeting conservatives and Republicans. So
there's a great website on the actual undisputed public record of Senator Kamala Harris. They want to defund the cops. They just nominated the ultimate cop for vice president. This woman incarcerated thousands of African Americans and poor people for the first time nonviolent crime of possession. That's ridiculous. In some cases, giving them long draconian sentences. Somebody put up a great website on her record. It's all factual. That content has now been banned on Facebook.
Wow. Why do you think they picked her?
Well, Biden, I think, kind of backed himself into a corner by saying that he would take a female, not just a female, but a female of color. The pool of qualified candidates was relatively small. I mean, the American people are pretty smart. They understand that running a small town is not the same as running the United States of America. there is a stature level. Running $1 billion corporation is like running the United States of America. Trump meets that threshold. Being a U.S. senator, being a governor, those things are important. So from a stature point of view, she was the only candidate I think was credible on paper as a president. Her own campaign did not do terribly well. I don't think they understand that in this country, the black vote is not monolithic, that there are Jamaicans and Dominicans and Colombians, all kinds of people who are not African American, and their values and their voting patterns are quite different. So the assumption that just because she's black means she automatically gets black votes, that's identity politics. I reject that. But she's a perfect fit, though. Think about it. Joe Biden is the father of the law which turbocharges our drug laws. He's the father of a law that requires the harsh mandatory penalties for the first-time nonviolent crime of possession of small amounts of drugs. He is the person, other than Bill Clinton, most responsible for the mass incarceration of hundreds of thousands of black people for nonviolent crimes. and Kamala Harris gleefully enforced these laws in California as a district attorney, as attorney general, sometimes giving people draconian sentences that dragged on beyond the time to which they were sentenced so that the state could make use of their free labor. So they're perfect for each other. The two of them are tied to the most racist policy in American history, in my opinion, other than slavery.
Yeah, yeah. And yet I think it's the most racist thing of all to broad stroke all, black African American voters say, well, we have Kamala, so, vote for her. You guys will be, that's really interesting.
It's identity politics.
Yeah. Have you watched any of the other, kind of hard to find documentaries like Out of Shadows, which talks about pedophilia in Hollywood, or the Fall Cabal series that was on YouTube for a time? Or
I confess to you that I have not. I'm even. I watched all of Broadway of Boardwalk Empire, which I thought was amazing because I kind of like those period costume dramas. But it's about politics and so on in the 20s in Atlantic City. And I confess I started House of Cards, which I loved, because the character played by Kevin Spacey is Lyndon Johnson. It's a combination of Bill Clinton and Lyndon Johnson. And they show you pictures of Johnson in the background throughout the whole series. But even then I got behind. I've been a little busy trying to stay out of the federal penitentiary. So I haven't had much time for video entertainment. And now I've got to write a book about this entire experience, because people need to understand what I went through. Since I was gagged, people have no idea the misconduct of the government.
What did the Netflix documentary about you get wrong?
This idea that I was using Donald Trump's prospective candidacy as a Reform Party candidate to block or destroy Pat Buchanan is just not true. I wanted Donald Trump to run for president in 2000 because I wanted him to run for president in 2000. It wasn't about some other candidate. Did I think Trump would be a greatly superior candidate to Pat Buchanan, who's a friend of mine, by the way, going all the way back to the Nixon days? Yes, I did. They saw some nefarious plot there when there was none. So there's one example.
Yeah. Oh, good. Well, I can't wait to see, with the new book you're going to write. And I actually have to read your first book, so I can be prepared.
Well, if you want, start with The Man Who Killed Kennedy, The Case Against LBJ.
Okay.
This book is a New York Times bestseller. It's my first book. Six publishers rejected it, saying it had no commercial value.
Wow.
It reads like a murder mystery. I'm not an attorney, but I think I overwhelmingly make the case using eyewitness testimony, fingerprint evidence, deep Texas politics, a lot of anecdotal stuff. I'm very proud of it. It's a great read. I would recommend that one first.
Okay, Great. Oh, and I wanted to talk about what's your take on Joe Rogan? I feel like because I know you understand, I think, a lot of the voters that are part of the silent majority, I guess. A lot of people would call them, some people call them angry white voters, but I feel like Joe Rogan appeals to a huge group of people that feel like that their voices don't matter because they're white, because they're men. And he's become hugely popular over the last few years.
I mean, I like Joe Rogan. I watch his podcast. I watched it a lot more before I got embroiled in all this controversy. I like the fact that he's very outspoken about cannabis legalization. I note that when he has Alex Jones on, he racks up some of the greatest ratings he's ever had. I'm waiting for my invitation, but it hasn't come. I also want to go on Barstool Sports just to talk about pizza, because I know more about pizza than anyone in America.
Yeah?
Not Pizzagate,
of
pizza,
course. Right.
You eat. So,
what's your favorite, like in New York City, where's your favorite place to go?
I like John's of Bleecker Street.
Okay.
Which is, I don't know if they used to just take cash. They didn't take credit cards. The char on their crust is unbelievable.
Ooh, okay.
That's probably still my favorite.
Okay. What do you get on your pizza?
Sausage, nothing else.
Just sausage. All right.
Sausage. I'm kind of a purist.
Yeah. If I can think of anybody to connect you with to help to get you on the pizza tasting show. God damn it, I can't remember the name, but it's like one bite. Everybody knows the rules. I've seen it 100 times.
Sports. I'm gonna ask Tucker Carlson to hook me up.
Yeah, he did it. He was.
I don't want to talk politics. I want to talk pizza. I mean, I'm one of these people who like drive 4 hours out of the way in New Jersey to find an obscure pizza place that I've read about because it's supposed to be that great. I'm very into it. I wrote a piece for New York Magazine 25 years ago on the best pizza in New York City. Almost all those institutions are now gone, by the way. It's kind of
yeah, it's gonna be really scary. I live out in Westchester, and I'll go into the city like once a week just to do a show I do on Compound Media, which is Anthony Cumia's network that he started 5 years ago. Yeah, that's what I really worry about, is like a lot of these good small businesses are gonna go out of business. I feel like New York is going to lose a lot of its really great pizza because of all this lockdown bullshit.
Westchester does have Anthony's coal-fired pizza. Anthony's is a franchise, but it started here in Fort Lauderdale. I actually know Anthony, who is no longer the owner, but who started it. It's different. It's a little thicker, but they get the char right, and it's very consistent. So I think it's in White Plains.
Oh, okay. Wow. Okay, I know where that is. What do you think that Chicago deep dish pizza should even be classified?
It should be made illegal, and anybody eats it should get the death penalty.
Really? You don't even think it should be called pizza? You think it should be a different category?
Bread. This is bread. Should not be called pizza. This is bread. A friend of mine, Frank Morano, was a producer for Joe Piscopo's radio show. And I was coming in to tape a segment, but it was lunchtime. I was starving, so I said, Frank, run to the pizza place downstairs and get me a couple slices. I'm dying. I show up for the taping, and he has like pieces of deep dish pizza. I said, what is wrong with you? If I tell people back in Staten Island that you did this, they'll never let you back in. So now, even today on the air, I always refer to him as Frank Deep Dish Pizza. He now has his own show on WABC in New York. He's more knowledgeable about radio than anyone I know, but his knowledge of pizza is ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, deep dish, it's sloppy. You can't hold it in your hand. It's like
I'm against it. Mancow, the great Chicago radio talk show host and shock jock, is a good friend of mine. Such a good friend that when he heard that the judge in my case had rejected my request for home confinement, had put me under immediate house arrest and told me that I had to turn myself in on July 14th. The guy jumps on an airplane in Chicago, flies all the way here to knock on my front door and show up unannounced. It was really great. And we hung out for a couple of days. But he defends Chicago pizza, but maybe it's because he has to, who knows?
Yeah. So being a pizza purist, would you consider how there's artichoke pizza, which has like the thick artichoke layers, and they'll have like crab pizza. Do you feel like those are inferior pizzas?
First of all, Fruit does not belong on pizza. Okay?
Yeah.
Pineapple is a fruit. Fruit does not belong on pizza. Vegetables like mushrooms on pizza, yes, that makes perfect sense. But a pineapple, that's a pasta. That's
gross.
that's awful. It's awful. Or barbecued chicken pizza. Please give me a break. I'm a purist. I would not go with any of that. It's like a California phenomenon. What do they know about pizza? You know, I mean, pizza is a New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Connecticut thing. Connecticut style pizza is a very unique style of pizza. There was a great rivalry, for example, in New Haven on Worcester Street, where Frank Pepe's and Sally's Pizza were across the street from each other. Very similar in style, but not identical. And you had to pledge your allegiance to either one or the other. You couldn't like go to both. Frank Pepe's was they're both very good. I was more fond of Sally's, but these are shrines to great pizza. This is the greatest pizza in the world. It's very thin. It's got a decent amount of char. It's great stuff.
And what are your feelings on crust, crust droop? You know what I mean? Do you like a pizza to sort of like be sort of structured and, not droop in your hand? Is that a deal breaker for you?
Yeah, it is. It's, I'm not, first of all, who needs all of those calories? Bread, it's bad enough you're eating the pizza. Pizza is my downfall. I can stay on a diet and I try to stay in shape, but who can turn down a great pizza? No one. I'm going to dust off my article from the New York Magazine because I got to get ready for Barstool Sports. I got to vault on there somehow.
I feel like you would do just as well as Tucker. I mean, I feel like you have even more pizza knowledge than him. So I feel like it's only a matter.
Wasps know very little about pizzas.
Yeah, I think I saw Tucker with a pinky up when he was eating his. Roger, thank you so much for coming on. This was such an honor and a pleasure. Where can people find you? What books, other than what you've mentioned, can you direct people to purchase?
Well, thank you for having me on. The reason I'm a little hoarse is because last night I went to the bash for Laura Loomer, who won a victory, and I introduced her to an incredibly large crowd. Now, to be honest with you, I didn't know whether I should give my remarks in Yiddish or English, but she's got very strong support from the Jewish community. I think she's going to pull an upset victory and be a real voice for millennials and a real voice against censorship.
Yeah.
You can follow me at stonecoldtruth.com. If you go to the store there, all my books are available. And yes, I signed them myself. Thank you. We even have props here. Thank you. We have the Clinton's War on Women. This one will curl your hair. This book almost got me sent to prison. The judge was apoplectic that I wrote this book because I criticized the Mueller investigation. It came out days before the gag order. The prosecutors tried to argue that it came out after the gag order and that I should be immediately jailed without having been convicted of any crime. Fortunately, the judge did not listen to them, although she was quite unhappy. So stonecoldtruth.com. I still have numerous civil suits against me, and therefore, unfortunately, I still have to keep raising legal money. So stonedefensefund.com, even though the $1 million I would need for an appeal is no longer necessary. A lot of left-wing crackpots just sue you because they can, and you can't just ignore them because they can go get a default judgment. So I have numerous crackpots like, Larry Klayman, complete nut job. This guy is suing me in various jurisdictions because I hurt his feelings, I guess.
Wow. Well, also there's always Parler. I think are you banned?
I love Parler. I love Parler. I am new to Parler. I think I have 120,000 followers after only a couple weeks. Wow. Go to my Parler account right now and sign up. It's a mix of, cultural stuff, food, politics. I kind of mix it up. It's the only social media platform I'm left on, having been banned years ago on Twitter. I had 550,000 followers when they banned me for making fun of Jake Tapper's shoes, I think.
Wow.
And I've now been banned on Facebook. I had a great time at Instagram. I liked Instagram, but I've been banished for life because truth tellers like Roger Stone, like Laura Loomer, like Alex Jones on some topics, because I don't agree with him on everything, we're very dangerous.
Yeah.
People, for the free exchange of ideas, very dangerous to the American left and to those who disagree with us. You see, they can't win a battle of ideas. They can't win a vigorous and open debate. So their answer to everything is silence them.
Yep. And they're not gonna silence total nonsense, you know. So it's like they only silence that which they feel is a threat.
Well, Keith Olbermann can advocate the violent assassination of Donald Trump, but he's still got his little blue check mark. I make fun of Jake Tapper, and I'm gone. So that's the way it is.
Have you tried TikTok?
It's owned by the Chinese communists, so I think I'll stay away from it.
Right. All right. Roger, thank you so much for coming on. This was great. Everybody, get on Parler, follow Roger, buy his books. Great to have you, buddy.
Thanks for having me here. I hope to be back with you again.
Of course, anytime. And we'll have to get you on Barstool.
Thanks.
Bye.